Hello, welcome. This is Jeffrey Mangus with Books Build Leaders podcast, and I'm so excited today. I've got Marcia Layton Turner, the president of and owner of the Association of Ghostwriters, and she's a fantastic ghostwriter. And I'd love that she's on the show. Welcome, Marcia.
Thanks so much for inviting me. You know, I love talking about ghostwriting, so happy to be here.
We do love to talk about it, don't we? That's great. Yeah. Speaking of that, the Association of Ghostwriters, if anyone here is not aware of this group, it's a wonderful association that Marcia's created. You've owned it for quite a few years, right, Marcia? Is that right?
I started it in 2010 when I noticed that a lot of our colleagues were starting to do ghostwriting work. And I thought it would make sense to kind of create a community for us to share what we were doing, sort of create best practices, really, is what we end up doing in the group. Yeah, it's an awesome community. Everybody is so willing to share information, which is, I think, unusual, even in freelance writing.
I totally agree, and I'll be honest with you. I mean, being a member of the Association of Ghostwriters for me is like I can't imagine my life without it, and that's being serious.
Oh, thank you.
Why? Because you know for a fact that being a writer is a kind of a lone profession. So
Yes.
and you're right. To me, there's no competition between ghostwriters. There's just not because there's too much work out there. But being having a lone profession, you learn a lot. It's great to get with other like-minded individuals and to share and realize you're not alone in this thing. You're not. You actually have a team that's behind you. It's really great. So.
Yeah. And that's what so many people say when they apply for membership. They'll say, I thought I was the only one, essentially. And it is exciting when they come into the fold and have a chance to share their experiences, discuss challenges or opportunities they've come across. So yeah, I learn something new every day from the group, which I completely appreciate.
I do too. There's not a single day that I'm the only reason I'm on Facebook, honestly, is because the association and my family. That's it. That's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thing I could, if I could do, I just couldn't do without it because I learned something every single time I'm in there from all these great folks. And then also the meetings are just invaluable to me. I love them. Yeah.
Yeah. They're fun.
But before you started the Associate Ghostwriters, I wanted to ask, what got you started in ghostwriting? What was that moment that kind of switched and how did you get into it? So.
Well, I think my experience is similar to a lot of other ghostwriters in that I got into it sort of by happenstance. I had been writing books. I'm an author. I had written, I don't know, 10 or 12 books. And I developed a reputation in the traditional publishing industry as sort of a fixer, a book doctor. So if an acquisitions editor had contracted and with an author for a book and what they got wasn't exactly what they were expecting, they would call me and say, "Hey, Marcia, can you work with this author and fix it?" So I had been doing that, and then one day my agent happened to meet with a traditional publisher one, I think it was like a Friday afternoon, and she immediately called me and said, "Hey, Marcia, I have this project that I think is perfect for you." And it was a marketing book by this well-known person who was under contract, and the book had been due 7 months ago, and he hadn't written a word.
Oh my
And
gosh.
okay. So I asked her, "So how does this work?" And she kind of talked me through it. Well, he has an outline that's been approved by the publisher. He's going to ship you all the materials he's been gathering because he's been anticipating having to write this book, and then you'll just work with him to talk it through. And so that's exactly what happened. He shipped me one or two banker's boxes full of printed articles and notes and things he'd been thinking about, organized by chapter. He was very organized. And so I feel like 2 or 3 times a week we would have a call. This was pre-Zoom, where we would say, "Okay, chapter one, what did you want to say?" And so we got through it, got it done in like 8 weeks, I want to say 6 weeks.
Weeks. Wow.
And it was really fast because, I mean, he was so late and the book had so many pre-orders that they didn't want to cancel it. So I was under the gun and was hoping, that I was doing a good job, but didn't really know. And so at the end of it, my agent said, "Oh, everybody loves the book. It's great." I was like, "Awesome. What was that? Like, what do you call it? It's not really book doctoring because there
Right.
wasn't a manuscript to begin with."
Yeah.
oh, that's ghostwriting. I was like, awesome. I want more of that.
More of
And
that.
so, yeah, that. Um, because it was just so fun to have access to this expert and to be able to ask all the questions that came up to me that I thought the reader would have.
Yeah.
And to get paid for it. It was like this was the ultimate. And so from then on, I thought, okay, ghostwriter. So I would let all my editors that I was working with know, hey, if you have any ghostwriting needs, let me know. And it just sort of built from there. But
Wow.
yeah, I didn't know that's what it was called when I did it the first time. How about you?
Well, me, I mean, you probably heard my story, and I'll say it real quick. When I lost my leg in 2017, and nearly died, but it was that time, that moment where, I was helpless. I couldn't do anything. So all I could do to deal with the grief and the depression was to write a journal. So that became my first book. And that book was not so good, but it was still it was an affirmation that, I could do that. And
Yeah.
I found that I really loved it. So then a friend of mine, again, by happenstance, just
Yeah.
caught wind of the book and said, hey, would you be interested in ghostwriting a book for me? And I thought that was interesting. I knew what ghostwriting was, but I never ever considered it me doing it.
Yeah.
And then that book, right out of the gate, we sold that book to HarperCollins Leadership. So I went from nowhere, nobody, to straight into the big five, which is, thank you. I'm very proud of that because it was a moment of trajectory, of life-changing trajectory, but I was scared out of my mind. I was dealing with editors, agents, the best in the business, and
Yep.
I'm like, all right, this is a do or die situation. You're going to either sink or you're going to swim. But that book became a bestseller, and it was I work with that author. We're still best friends today. So I had these relationships, but it started the whole career. And I'm like you, I wanted more of that. I'm like, this
Yeah.
is that.
Yeah.
I'm getting paid to write. I'm getting paid to write and bring someone's book to the world. There's no better job for me. I love it.
Yeah.
So that brings you to my next question. I'm really interested. You being who you are, and many years you've been into it. What do you love most about ghostwriting? What do you love most about the?
I really think it's the learning. It's the opportunity to learn. And although I enjoy the writing, it's almost secondary because that early process, when you're working with a client and you're trying to figure out how do I package all of this person's expertise, or how do I best make the case for whatever point this person is trying to make?
Right.
And you really have to kind of wrap your head around everything that they're sharing with you, get up to speed really fast. And sometimes that means that I have to immerse myself in doing research and watching videos. But it's so fun.
Really is.
So,
I am agreeing with you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I get
yeah.
excited to talk about this stuff because for me, I love the writing part, but the learning and the research is something I'm fascinated with it. I just finished a book for two surgeons writing on artificial intelligence. I learned so much about artificial intelligence. It was, I mean, like, it was crazy how fun it was to realize how deep it goes,
Yeah. Well,
Stuff
for me, the writing is kind of the end product.
yes.
If you get the learning down and you figure out what the client wants to say and what their voice sounds like, and you can structure it in a way that you think is effective, then the writing is kind of like, okay, now I know what to do. And you sit down to type. Okay, now I know how to tell this story, make this point. But that's the end product. And that is fun too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the best part is really just getting to ask anything of your expert.
That's true. That's true. I love any new ghostwriter that's listening to this or experienced ghostwriter. Take this advice to heart because it's not only the writing involved in the job. It's the other things that you can really latch onto, in my mind. To have fun with it. And building that. And to me, the research and the learning is part of capturing the author's voice because you're not always in their world. You might be experienced in their what they're talking about, but maybe you're not. I didn't know anything about artificial intelligence the way I do now. But when I dove into that and was able to learn, and then really it helped me capture their voice. And I was capturing two voices with that book. But it was a great book, great time in doing that. So any ghostwriter out there, take this advice to heart. learn to love research, learn to love other aspects of it besides just the writing. Perfect your writing, always be working on that. So that's great advice. So,
Well, I think you bring up a good point there, because if you try and rush too fast through the learning and the information gathering and go straight to writing, like you're so excited to start writing, then I think the quality is not going to be there, because it's not going to be as rich. If you're probably going to be short on words, short on stories, because you really haven't immersed yourself in all this information. So yeah, don't rush to the writing. Yeah, it's fun, but it's even more fun when you have so many ideas in your head from what the client has told you that you're like rushing,
that's right,
yeah.
exactly. But honestly, you bring up a great point there in my mind, because a lot of the ghostwriting discussions are revolved around fees and our value and what we bring to the table. It's that immersive period in my mind. When when you take on a client, and if you're a person here listening to this podcast who wants to write a book, I want you to consider that the ghostwriter is immersing themselves into your life, into your area of expertise. So you're bringing what you bring to the table, but the ghostwriter's immersing themselves. So that's where the value also comes into play with fees and compensation, because it's very challenging, in my opinion, and I'm sure others have agree, that to capture an author's voice is not just simply looking at a transcription and bringing it to the page.
Yeah.
It's about immersing yourself, learning, educating yourself, and then also using your creativity to bring all of that to the page. That's what I see as value there.
Yeah, it's not just, I think sometimes, maybe we'll talk about this in a second here, but sometimes people misunderstand the role of a ghostwriter. And I think some people think that we're transcriptionists, just like you said. It's not editing a transcript and then calling it a chapter. That's not really ghostwriting work. That's transcription.
Yeah, that's transcription.
There's really not creativity involved there. But
No.
when you have like the client, the author who has an idea and expertise, and then you have a ghostwriter who is curious and an excellent writer, and you put them together, the quality of that book is just so far above what either person could do on their own, I think.
That's exactly right. I love that. I was talking to another ghost earlier and we were talking about Chat GPT and AI and all that kind of thing. And you and I have talked about this before, but I'll bring it up. This is where, I mean, there's so many authors out there that think that they can use Chat GPT and AI to write their book in an hour. And yeah, you can, but
Right.
you'll never find an algorithm. And this is what I know for fact. You'll never find an algorithm or an AI, program that's going to capture the human emotion, the expertise of the writing. It's going to be able to capture that human element. It just can't happen. It won't happen. And this is why I never fear about my job ever being eliminated by artificial intelligence. Never. It's a beautiful part about it. So, Marcia, in your experience, going to my next question, when you're meeting new authors and new clients, and when you do meet with them and sign them on, say, what is there any special processes you have, interviewing processes that you find that is more helpful? And this is really a question for new ghostwriters to be able to learn some things about the interviewing process. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that my interviewing process is unique, but I think it's comprehensive. My interviews today are generally held on Zoom, just like this. In the past, they were phone-based, and
Right.
I would record them. But it goes back to immersing yourself in the information. That's where I start. Even before I'm worrying about what I'm going to ask the client, I want to get some level of understanding of the topic.
Right.
So I'll ask the client, just like I did with my first one, I'll ask them, please send me any materials that you've been collecting. Because most people who've been thinking about writing a book, they have a file. They have a
True.
file of articles that they thought were cool, or, hey, I may want to refer to that. So I say, please just send me all that stuff. And
Yeah.
sometimes they'll say, oh, but I have so much. Awesome. I love too much. Just
Yeah, me too. I love too much. You can't ever.
yeah. Right, because I can sift. I think that's maybe the one thing, at least editors have told me. I'm really good at taking massive amounts of material and zeroing in on what's the nugget that is crucial here.
Right.
So I'm not scared off by boxes and boxes or file, just seeing on your email the files coming in. That's great. So I start there and I read through everything they send me. And if I feel like there may be something missing, I'll go and I'll watch videos that they did of talks or presentations. I'll listen to podcast interviews, really trying to get some level of background in this topic to understand why is this book important? Like, why is this book relevant? Why do we need it now? And then that helps me put together better interview questions.
Really good. And you do have a specific set of questions you ask, including, can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, you don't have to give away all your, I mean, you just.
Well, I start from scratch with every client, honestly, Jeffrey, because the topics are so different. I mean, you're going to go through like who, what, when, where, why, how. Those are the basics.
Right.
And you got to make sure that you address all of those. But if it's someone who's telling the story of their company, I'm going to ask questions probably in a chronological order.
Yeah, right.
But I'm going to also really dig for stories and asking, how did you feel in that moment? Why did you do that? I'm asking why constantly. It probably really drives people nuts. Like,
No,
why?
I do the same thing.
Yeah. Why did you think that? Why did you assume that? Oh, what happened then? And why did they do that? Like just really bring me there. So all of that background research is so that I can write better questions so that the interview is richer, because that's where the magic really happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it does happen as you start writing because you're taking it the next step.
Right.
But if you are not a strong interviewer and you're just asking really basic questions, then the quality of the material you have to start with is also going to be lackluster because they're not really opening up to you. They're just reporting.
They're just,
Yes, in September, this happened.
yeah, that's right. When it goes back to what we talked about earlier in the podcast, being immersive, immersing ourselves into these projects. And it's such an integral part of the job. Absolutely. I love that. I do the same thing in my interviewing process. I mean, I keep asking why, what else, what's next, what else happened. I mean, I keep digging and digging and digging. And that's where you find, like you said, the nugget. You find those special things,
And my last question is always, what did I miss? What haven't I asked
Great advice. I've never thought
that
about
is important? Because inevitably, when I ask that, there are very few occasions when somebody said, oh, no, I think you asked everything. Inevitably, they're going to say, well, this one thing did happen, or, I'm not sure if this is important, but, and then you get something that maybe turns into like the title of the book.
Yes, exactly. That's happened quite often with me, actually. I'd say 70% of the books that I've written, we found a title by the interview process. Things
Yeah, I think that's normal.
With a title in their mind, but then after the interview, they're like, no, that needs to be the title of the book right there.
Right. It's usually a phrase that they say, isn't it?
Yeah,
something, some description of something, and you're like, oh, it's brilliant.
It's great when it happens to you. I think I've written about it. It's called sometimes it's those epiphanal moments that the author has. That's what the book should be called. It's like boom. It's like it just happens, the lightning strike moment, that kind of thing. So,
and I think that happens because they come into the interview expecting certain questions. I usually send my questions in advance, so they do have time to reflect and think back. But then as you're interviewing them and they're retelling the story and they're answering your, well, why, how, like they are also learning, they're reflecting and they may get a different perspective on whatever they're talking about. I've seen this happen as well. And so they're able to then say, well, you know what? Well, maybe this is why. And so it really, it just taps into information that you wouldn't have gotten if they were just like taking notes or something.
Right. Exactly right. And that's what makes, and like you said, it's what makes the book better, allows you to dive deeper as a ghost and make things happen that's going to have some impact. I love that. So our industry, we have a very unique industry. I think ghostwriting, and I'll be honest with you, I never thought I'd love something so much. I mean, I really didn't. I have done many things in my life. I've worked in cardiovascular surgery. I have been an inventor. I started a children's lullaby tape company. I've done a lot of things, and then real estate. Of course, I did that for a long time, but this is the end all for me. I can't imagine doing anything else. But as a ghostwriter, you in your position, what disadvantages do you see that ghostwriters have in today's society? What are the disadvantages? Maybe we'll even talk about some advantages. So if you don't mind, what's your opinion on that? Disadvantages.
Disadvantages, I think there are a couple big ones. The first is sort of what I touched on a few minutes ago when I said that I don't think that society understands the role that we play. I think they're starting to understand because more celebrities are talking about the ghostwriters that they worked with and what that process looked like.
That's
So I
right.
think the average person is hearing that term ghostwriter more, but they often, I find, have a skewed perception of what exactly we do. So I sometimes get questions about ethics.
Yeah.
Is ghostwriting ethical? Because people think that we as ghostwriters are doing a lot more of the thinking than they give the author credit for. So what I've heard from a lot of people is they think that the author says, I want to write a book about rivers, and go do that. Marcia, go write a book about rivers. I want it to be 250 pages long and about all the rivers in the US. And so then people think that I then go away and I do all the research and I put it together and then I hand it back and say, here's your book on rivers.
Right.
And that's not how it goes
That,
in nonfiction. Now, in fiction, which I don't write, I think that may be more likely, it may be more possible, let's say, because if somebody has an idea for a sci-fi futuristic thing and they can lay out the plot and say, here are the main characters and here's how I want it to go, I
yeah.
could see that a skilled fiction writer could take it and run with it.
Sure.
And there's no voice that you're capturing because it's all made up. So I
Right.
could see that working, but in nonfiction, it really is a partnership. And I'm finding myself that I'm talking increasingly with clients and prospects about being a writing partner, because the book can't happen without the client. And
That's
so
right.
this is why I think it's completely ethical, because when you hire a ghostwriter, you're hiring somebody who is a publishing expert, essentially, a strong writer, and somebody who's going to help you put together this book.
Right.
However, the author, the client, has all the knowledge and information. So you as a ghostwriter are tasked with gathering all of that, helping to package it in a way that is smart and effective, and then writing it. But at each step, the client is involved. The client's providing all the background information. They're pointing you to research. They're talking you through what message they want to share. And then they're reviewing the drafts that you send. So there is no way that they could say, like, I never saw it. I hired her, but no, I never read it or anything. That's not how ghostwriting works. And so that's why questions of ethics to me, once I explain that, well, I can't do it without you. So
Yes. Yes.
that's the biggest challenge. I think people just really understanding the involvement that the author has to have, that it is truly their book, it's their ideas. I'm not stealing them. I'm, and I never would. That's another, some people think that, oh, I'm worried about a ghostwriter stealing my idea.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
an idea by itself, you can't copyright an idea.
No.
But once it gets down on paper, then it can be. But if somebody came to me and said, well, I don't want to tell you about my book because I'm afraid you'll steal the idea. It's your idea. It's your thoughts. We could both write a book on the same topic and it would be so different.
Completely different. Exactly right. I speak
Right.
about this all the time because I met a new author a while ago, a potential new author, and that was the biggest conversation piece. Was I explained to them that it's not me as your writer and you over here. It's about a collaboration. It's a come togetherness, right? That it's your idea, your book. I'm here to just facilitate and bring it to the page, but it's going to take you and me getting along, working together, collaborating, shaping, and polishing this thing till it's to the end. And that's as a new author, if you're any author listening to this podcast today, take that advice to heart, because you must get along with your ghostwriter, because you're going to be working with them for at least 6 months in my mind. Usually it's 6 months, whatever. But you must also get along, and your personalities must mesh. and to understand that you are bringing your ideas to the ghostwriter. It's their job to bring it to the page, and it's a collaboration effort. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest challenge, that people are reluctant to explore hiring a ghostwriter because they don't understand the role that we play. So that's a challenge that we have to overcome. The other challenge is more about marketing, and we've had a lot of conversations about this as well. It's very hard to market yourself as an experienced ghostwriter when you can't talk about your client by name, the book title by name. It's a catch-22. It's like, well, I
Yes.
had experience, but I can't tell you.
Yeah. I can't talk about it, but I've got it.
Right. You don't know me, but trust me, I'm good.
Yeah, you
You
got to trust me. You got to just trust me on this.
right, right. It doesn't work that way. So we've had, I know, in the Association of Ghostwriters, lots of conversations about how to not really get around it, but what you can and can't say. And so I think you probably do the same thing that I do. I try and explain who my client was, not by name, but business leader, nonprofit leader, doctor, attorney, whatever. And then the
Yes, I
topic.
explain it very deeply. Like I've worked with a CEO of a, I'm just really, really adamant. I never named that person, but I listed
Right.
out, yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Fortune 500 CEO, Inc. 500
Yes.
founder, something like that.
Flew
And
the
then the
first
topic,
F-16, whatever that is, it's,
right,
yeah,
right, to give them a sense of how big the company was that
yeah.
they were in charge of, and then what the topic was, and then when it came out and how it was produced. Was it a traditional publisher? If so, oftentimes I'll name the publisher because I haven't said enough for anybody to figure out what the book was, or hybrid or self-published.
Right.
And
That's really
so
good.
that's my list of topics. But then I also encourage ghostwriters to have people outsiders who can vouch for you, like
Yeah.
an editor that you worked with, a publisher that you worked with. Not that they're going to be able to name the project, but they can say, yes, Marcia's worked on 6 projects for us. One was about this, just kind of confirming everything that's on that page. So that's the way to be able to market yourself, but it's a big challenge. And I think on the author client side, it's got to be a challenge to pick somebody because you're trusting that what they're telling you is true.
That's right.
And I think it's a real leap of faith. I respect the people who are able to do that because they really don't know. They don't, they're trusting.
That they're trusting, and again, it goes back to that trust aspect, the collaboration aspect. You're just going to have to, at some point, you just have to just put your neck out and say, okay, I'm going to trust this person. I'm going to do
Right.
that. You know.
And
Um,
and that brings up a point that often comes up when I'm having conversations with clients, and maybe this is a recommendation that you make too. But when clients say, like, how should I choose? You're in having a call with a prospect.
yeah.
And I always say, I really would recommend that you go with your gut. If you have people, 2 or 3 people who are equally experienced, all of them can do the work well, who do you feel most confident in? Who do you like? Who are you going to look forward to talking to? And to your point about it being a 6 or 9 month process, even a year, like, who are you going to want to get on the Zoom every week or every 2 weeks? If there's somebody that you really are not, like, your gut is telling you,
Yeah.
that's not the ghostwriter. They could be the best New York Times bestselling ghostwriter, but if you don't really trust them and like them, they're not your ghostwriter.
That's exactly right. Matter of fact, I was talking about it today, and I'll say it again. I met with a client a couple of weeks ago, and the gentleman was a great guy. It has nothing to do with the person, but my gut just was telling me, and the fee would have been probably fantastic, but my gut was just too strong about do I really want to be with this gentleman for 6 months or 8 months? And I stuck to my gut, and I declined the job.
Yep.
And I feel good about that because he's probably going to be better off with someone who,
Right.
I don't think I would have been as engaged as I normally would have. And I was just honest with myself. It wasn't about money. It was about that. And I think any new author that's listening to this podcast, listen to your gut. Who do you get along with? It's not about the money, please. I mean, yeah, you might find a cheaper ghostwriter, but again, we're talking about personality match and collaboration. And it's really important there. And new ghostwriters, if you're listening to this, or again, go with your gut. If you don't just do it for the money. I mean, I know when you're starting out, you got to do what you got to do. And I get that, if you need money for whatever, but you also really got to take into consideration, can you get along with that person for the next 3, 6, or 8 months, or even a year? Are you going to be able to do that? So be honest with yourself, and trust me, you'll thank yourself in the end if you choose your gut. It always works out right.
Well, and I think you brought up a really important point that some ghostwriters aren't really aware of. When you're having a conversation with a prospect, an author and a ghostwriter, it's a two-way street. You are both deciding whether you want to work together. So
That's
yeah,
right.
you may feel like you're being interviewed for a job, but also you get to decide, do you want this job? And
That's
by the
right.
end of that conversation, you may decide, it's a lot of money, but I'm going to hate this. I'd rather wait for something that's a better fit.
That's
And
right.
I think sometimes if you come into a conversation with confidence that like, yeah, I need to interview you, client, to see if I want to give you my time, then sometimes that's attractive to them to know that,
Yes.
oh, you are confident and that you're going to get better advice because you're going to be willing to push back and offer your recommendations. You're not just a yes person saying, yeah, whatever you want, which
Yeah.
it is true. They should get whatever they want, but I think you do need to have the confidence to say, here's what I recommend.
That's right. There's a
Take it or
balance
leave.
there. I mean, I learned that early on in my career. One of the I think it was like the second book that I ended up ghostwriting. I I went against my gut, and I really, because I needed the money, and I just you've been there,
Yeah.
and it was a low paying job. I mean, but it was what it was. I did what I had to do, but
Sure.
this author put me through the coals, just railed me all the time. It was awful, but I did not give up. I finished that book, but when he asked me to do another book after that, I declined
Yeah.
and went and moved on. So I
Yep.
learned a lesson there. So yeah, it's always about the collaboration, personality match, and it's not always about the money. And you gotta go with your gut. So I appreciate that honesty here. Marcia, it's been great having you today. So how can people get in touch with you? And also, can you tell our listeners how they can possibly look at the Association of Ghostwriters if they're new and maybe they're
Sure.
listening to this podcast? So yeah, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, the Association of Ghostwriters is online at associationofghostwriters.org. We have a great blog. A number of AOG members contribute to it. So I think it's a really good starting place, especially for newer ghostwriters who are trying to understand what it means to be a ghostwriter. I have my own website, marcialaytonturner.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. DM me there, DM me on Facebook if you want. Like I'm around, and I'm happy to answer questions. Jeffrey, just to mention, I get a lot of messages from people who are worried about getting scammed. And
Yes.
so I would encourage you, listeners, if you're considering hiring a ghostwriting agency, please email me or email Jeffrey to have us take a look at the website to make sure that you are not going to lose your money. Not that
I,
we can guarantee it, but like we know what to look for.
yeah, that is great advice. Thank you for that, because there's so much out there. It seems like kind of scammy and kind of spammy.
Yes. Yep.
Even in my LinkedIn world, I get so many messages that has nothing to do with what I'm doing, and it's an instant block for me. I mean, I
Yep.
block them. I don't even encourage it. So yeah, thank you so much. But thanks again for coming and being on the show. I'm really excited, and I can't wait for this to go out into the world. So yeah.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. This is Jeffrey Mangus with Booksfield Leaders Podcast. Thanks again for listening, and we will talk to you and have a great, wonderful day. Thank you.